Chapter 57 of Nickleby by Charles Dickens. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Shane Nolan. Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. Chapter 57. It was a dark, wet, gloomy night in autumn, when in an upper room of a mean house situated in an obscure street, or rather court, near Lambeth, there sat all alone a one-eyed man grotesquely habited, either for lack of better garments or for purposes of disguise, in a loose great-coat, with arms half as long again as his own, and a capacity of breadth and length which would have admitted of his winding himself in it, head and all, with the utmost ease, and without any risk of straining the old and greasy material of which it was composed. So attired, and in a place so far removed from his usual haunts and occupations, and so very poor and wretched in his character, perhaps Mrs. Squeers herself would have had some difficulty in recognizing her lord, quickened though her natural sagacity doubtless would have been by the affectionate yearnings and impulses of a tender wife. But Mrs. Squeers' lord it was, and in a tolerably disconsolate mood Mrs. Squeers' lord appeared to be, as helping himself from a black bottle which stood on the table beside him, he cast round the chamber a look, in which very slight regard for the object within view was plainly mingled with some regretful and impatient recollection of distant scenes and persons. There were certainly no particular attractions, either in the room over which the glance of Mr. Squeers so discontentedly wandered, or in the narrow street into which it might have penetrated, if he had thought fit to approach the window. The attic chamber in which he sat was bare and mean, the bedstead, and such few other articles of necessary furniture as it contained, were of the commonest description, in a most crazy state, and of a most uninviting appearance. The street was muddy, dirty, and deserted. Having but one outlet, it was traversed by few but the inhabitants at any time, and the night being one of those on which most people are glad to be within doors, it is now presented no other signs of life than the dull glimmering of poor candles from the dirty windows, and few sounds but the pattering of rain and occasionally the heavy closing of some creaking door. Mr. Squeers continued to look disconsolately about him, and to listen to these noises in profound silence, broken only by the rustling of his large coat, as he now and then moved his arm to raise his glass to his lips. Mr. Squeers continued to do this for some time, until the increasing gloom warned him to snuff the candle. Seeming to be slightly roused by this exertion, he raised his eyes to the ceiling and fixed it upon some uncouth and fantastic figures, traced upon it by the wet and damp which had penetrated through the roof, broke into the following soliloquy. "Well, this is a pretty go, is this here. An uncommon pretty go. Here I've been, a matter of how many weeks hard upon 6, a-following up this here blessed old dowager petty larcener." Mr. Squeers delivered himself of this epitaph with great difficulty and effort, and Dotheboys Hall a-running itself regularly to seed the while. That's the worst of ever being in with an audacious chap like that old Nickleby. You never know when he's done with you, and if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. This remark perhaps reminded Mr. Squeers that he was in for £100 at any rate. His countenance relaxed, and he raised his glass to his mouth with an air of greater enjoyment of its contents than he had ever before evinced. "I never see," soliloquized Mr. Squeers in continuation, "I never see nor come across such a file as that old Nickleby. Never. He's out of everybody's depth, he is. He's what you may call a rasper, is Nickleby. To see how sly and cunning he grubbed on day after day, a-warming and plodding and tracing and turning and twining himself about, till he found out where this precious Mrs. Pig was hid, and cleared the ground for me to work upon, creeping and crawling and gliding like an ugly old bright-eyed stagnation bloody adder. Ah, he'd have made a good un in our line, but it would have been too limited for him. His genius would have busted all bonds and coming over every obstacle broke down all before it till it erected itself into a monument of, well, I think of the rest. I say it when it's convenient. Making a halt in his reflection at this place, Mr. Squeers again put his glass to his lips and drawing a dirty letter from his pocket, proceeded to con over its contents with the air of a man who had read it very often and now refreshed his memory rather in the absence of better amusement than for any specific information. "The pigs is well," said Mrs. Squeers. "The cows is well, and the boys is bobbish. Young Sprouter's been a winking, has he? I'll wink him when I get back. Colby would persist in sniffing while he was a-eating his dinner, and said that the beef was so strong it made him. Very good, Colby. We'll see if we can't make you sniff a little without beef. Pitcher was took ill with another fever. Of course he has. And being fetched by his friends, died the day after he got home. Of course he did, and out of aggravation. It's part of a deep-laid system. There ain't another chap in the school but that boy was as would have died exactly at the end of the quarter, taking it out of me to the very last, and then carrying his spite to the utmost extremity. The juniorest Palmer said that he wished he was in heaven. I really don't know. I do not know what's to be done with that young fella. He's always a-wishing something horrid. He once said he wished he was a donkey because then he wouldn't have a father as didn't love him. Pretty wishes that for a child of 6. Mr. Squeers was so much moved by the contemplation of this hardened nature in one so young, that he angrily put up the letter and sought in a new train of ideas a subject of consolation. "It's a long time to have been a lingering in London," he said, "and this is a precious hole to come and live in, even if it's been only for a week or so. Still, £100 is 5 boys, and 5 boys takes a whole year to pay £100. And there's their keep to be subtracted besides. There's nothing lost, neither, by one's being here, because the boys' money comes in just the same as if I was at home, and Mrs. Squeers, she keeps them in order. There'll be some lost time to make up, of course. There'll be an arrear of flogging as I'll have to be gone through. Still, a couple of days makes that all right, and I don't mind a little extra work for £100. It's pretty nigh the time to wait upon the old woman. From what she said last night, I suspect that if I'm to succeed at all, I shall succeed tonight. So I'll have a half a glass more to wish myself success and put myself in spirits. Mrs. Squeers, my dear, your health." Leering with his one eye as if the lady to whom he drank had been actually present, Mr. Squeers in his enthusiasm no doubt poured out a full glass and emptied it. As the liquor was raw spirits, and he had applied himself to the same bottle more than once already, it is not surprising that he found himself, by this time, in an extremely cheerful state, and quite enough excited for his purpose. What this purpose was soon appeared, for, after a few turns about the room to steady himself, he took the bottle under his arm and the glass in his hand, and blowing out the candle as if he proposed being gone for some time, stole out about upon the staircase, and creeping softly to a door opposite his own, tapped gently at it. "But what's the use of tapping?" he said. "She'll never hear. I suppose she isn't doing anything very particular, and if she is, it don't much matter that I see." With this brief preface, Mr. Squeers applied his hand to the latch of the door, and thrusting his head into a garret far more deplorable than that he had just left, and seeing that there was nobody there but an old woman who was bending over a wretched fire, for although the weather was still warm, the evening was chilly, walked in and tapped her on the shoulder. "Well, my slider," said Mr. Squeers jocularly. "Is that you?" inquired Peg. "Aw, it's me, and me's the first person singular nominative case agreeing with the verb it's, and governed by Squeers understood as an acorn an hour, but when the H is sounded, the A only is to be used as a and, a ought, and a I way," replied Mr. Squeers, quoting at random from the grammar. "At least, if it isn't, you don't know any better, and if it is, I've done it accidentally." delivering this reply in his accustomed tone of voice, in which, of course, it was inaudible to Peg. Mr. Squeers drew a stool to the